Hi, and welcome back. This is Coach Bowman, your world history or pre AP world history teacher. And today we will begin our journey into the River Valley systems. This will be part one. And we have come from our prehistory unit where we looked into human existence and how our species populated the earth and how we developed and started to settle down and learn how to farm. So here is the continuation of our story. So again, let's take a look at what happened during the New Stone Age. We developed permanent settlements because of the farming, and we see this happening primarily around river valleys. These rivers would provide rich topsoil known as silt that was very fertile, and this was good for our crops, good for farming, good for agriculture, as well as these rivers would provide protection from invasions. And as you can see in the image here at the bottom, displaying an Egyptian plowing his field. You also notice the fact that we do have not only agriculture, we also have advanced tools with the plow. We also have domestication with the oxen pulling that plow. So, what were these river valley civilizations? As you can see, we are going from 3500 BCE, which stands for before Common Era. Some of you all might be familiar with the BC, which stands for before Christ. However, when we look at dates going and using the BCE or BC, the years are going backwards, it looks like. It goes down to the imaginary year of zero. So in this case, these river valleys developed between 3500 and 500 BCE. One of the oldest civilizations is the Sumerian Mesopotamian civilization. This is found between the Tigris and Euphrates river valleys in southwestern Asia. Today we will call that area Kuwait or Iraq. We will also look into the Egyptian development of its civilization, and that happened along the Nile River and the Delta, which is at the mouth of the river by the Mediterranean Sea in northeast Africa. The next civilization is our Indian or Indus River Valley civilization. And as the name kind of tells you, it developed along the Indus River Valley in southern Asia. Last but certainly not least, the Chinese civilization. This developed along what's called the Honghe River, also known as the Yellow River Valley. And this is in eastern Asia. And here's the map of those locations. If you look at a large global map, it's actually kind of interesting how these four developed, and as you can see in the key there at the bottom right, different time periods, but they developed geographically in the same general lines of latitude. So that to me is kind of an interesting fact in that. Looking specifically at these civilizations, here you have Mesopotamia. Sumer, as you can see here, is down here in the southern portion, which borders the Persian Gulf. So Sumer is very small, so you can kind of think about that. The S for Sumer, small. You have the ancient city of Babylon. Some of you might have heard of that one before. You have Mesopotamia, which means land between the rivers. So you have the Euphrates to the west and Tigris to the east. The way I remember it, I think of the movie E.T. All right, you have E and then T. If you move further west or northwest, you get to the region known as Assyria. Today we know that there is a country there known as Syria, just Syria. Um, but that, and kind of key in on that one from our last unit, this is where you would find the ancient city of Aleppo. Here with Egypt, one of the things that's so fascinating with Egypt is the fact that the Nile River flows north. It flows north into the Mediterranean Sea. The Mediterranean Sea does not go into the Nile River. The river feeds into the Mediterranean. And the reason for that is the elevation. Down here in the south, where you see where it says Upper Egypt, that is of a higher elevation. Down here at the Lower Egypt, that is a lower elevation. So if you think about this, like the state of Virginia, Upper Egypt would be like, for instance, Harrisonburg, Charlottesville, up in the mountains. All right, there are hills and mountains in this region. And down here in Lower Egypt, that would be like Norfolk, Hampton Roads, Virginia Beach, flat, really close to ocean level, if you will. And that's the reason why they are called Lower Egypt in the north and Upper Egypt in the south. Now, down here in the very far bottom along the Nile River, you see what's called a cataract. A cataract is a fall or a rapid that is impassable. It definitely became a barrier for the Egyptian civilization. Speaking of barriers, if you notice to the west and to the east, you also have deserts. So the Nile River truly becomes known as the gift of, Egypt is known as the gift of the Nile because of these barriers that really truly were self dependent and had to rely upon the Nile River for a lot of different things. Here you have a map of the Indus River Valley. It's not necessarily India, but it's named after the river itself, the Indus River, which, as you can see today, is primarily in Pakistan. It flows from the Himalayan mountains south into the Arabian Sea, and we will get into more detail about the Indus River Valley here later on. Here's a map of ancient China, starting with the Shang Dynasty. The Shang Dynasty again develops along as this map indicates, the Yellow or the Honghe River. And again, you have the date up here at the top. We're looking around 1600 to 1046 BC. So again, some students like to think of that as backwards counting, but again, it stands for before Christ if it's BC, and BCE stands for before Common Era. So once again, what do these river valleys offer? What do they provide for these civilizations? Again, rich topsoil known as silt. As you can see in that image, a nice, rich, dark soil to help keep farming occurring in those regions, help keep people to settle. We also start to have irrigation. Irrigation tends to be a man-made ditch that allows water to come into areas that will help make land fertile. And again, as you can see here in this image, it is a man-made trough. It looks like a trough to me that water flows through, and you have these pipes coming out to allow these fields to be watered. Again, plants need water. So it's one of those things that we think of maybe like a sprinkler system, like on a football field or a baseball field, or maybe you've seen it in a park where they pop little sprinkler heads pop out of the ground to water the grass. Same general idea, but on a larger scale. Now, one of the regions, the biggest region here with the early river valleys is known as the Fertile Crescent. Today, it's known as the Middle East. But as you can see with these arrows, the different color arrows, which point to different smaller regions, there's a lot of people living in this area due to the fertile land. And that's the reason why it's called the Fertile Crescent, due to its shape. So starting from the right side of your screen with the yellow arrow, you have this civilization known as Sumer. The purple arrow is pointing to Babylon or Babylonia. The orange arrow is pointing to Mesopotamia, again, meaning the land between the rivers. And those two rivers are the Tigris and Euphrates. The red arrow is pointing to a small section known as Phoenicia, home to the Phoenicians. And then the blue arrow is pointing to Palestine, which is also known as Canaan, which will later on be known as the Promised Land to the Jewish people. Speaking of the Jewish people, there are other civilizations. The Hebrews, which is another name for the Jewish people, also known as Israelites. We will look at the Phoenicians, as well as a group of people known as the Nubians. So, who were the Hebrews? The Hebrews were a group of people who started in the Sumer area, primarily around the city known as Ur, spelled U-R, and they followed a man by the name of Abraham. This is the biblical Abraham. And they followed him to the area known as Canaan. To them, it was the Promised Land. We will get into more details about the Jews and the Israelites later on here in a few weeks. But this is just kind of a scratching the surface about who these people are and where were they located. So the Hebrews, as I said, they followed Abraham to the Promised Land and settled in an area known as Canaan. Later on, developed to become Israel. But this region is between the Mediterranean Sea and the Jordan River Valley. The Jordan River Valley is a small river valley. Those of you might have heard of this river valley. This is where the baptism of Jesus occurred. There's a lot of biblical events happened in this area. The Hebrews are settled in this area, which is part of the Fertile Crescent. And again, this is in southwestern Asia. And they will, what they are becoming truly known for, they would develop the first major monotheistic religion. Monotheistic meaning one God, which is what we know today as Judaism. As I mentioned already, they are known as Hebrews, but also known as Jews or Israelites. Sometimes the questions might say Jews, sometimes the worksheets might say Israelites, sometimes the readings might say Hebrews. Just know that those three names are for the same group of people. To me, the Phoenicians were a fascinating group of people. They developed major sea routes, as you can see in this map here. They were the first to truly go and explore the Atlantic Ocean, as you can see to the far left side of your map there. And you see on the map different ports that they would trade and stop and rest at. So the Phoenicians were sea traders. Their mindset was all money, not necessarily conquering or war, but they were a trades people. So as you saw on the map, they settled primarily around the Mediterranean coast, starting with the eastern Mediterranean coast and then worked their way around. Again, they were a part of the Fertile Crescent in Southwest Asia, but they also developed things like glass, taking sand and melting it down and using this glass became a very in high demand commodity. They were able to basically jack up the price to whatever they wanted, and they got it. It was a luxury item for a lot of people during this time period. They also developed a purple dye from sea snails and other creatures of the sea that have ink sacs, and they would use that dye for fabrics as well as glass. So you have a variety of glass to choose from. The other major development from the Phoenicians was the alphabet. It was their way of writing, and this alphabet would later on, over time, transform and morph into the alphabet that we use today. So, words like phonics, you might think of the word phone with the Phoenicians. Um, those type of things are traced back to these people. So, with the last group is the Nubians. The Nubians were a group of people that lived south of Egypt, as you see in the map there, pointed by the green arrow. They lived south of the cataract, and so the area that they lived in was truly between the Nile River and the Red Sea. Um, the Nubians were hardworking people. They developed a lot of things with the Egyptians from not developed, but more so adapted Egyptian culture, language, religion. They traded a lot with the Egyptians. However, over time, the Egyptians became stronger and demanded more from the Nubians to the point where they actually traveled beyond the cataracts into Nubia and captured part of Nubia as their empire grew. So, again, the Nubians are a fascinating group of people. Just make sure you are aware of where they are located. Again, south of Egypt, along the Nile, between the Red Sea and the Nile. So, what lies ahead for us? Looking ahead in the next week or so, we're going to be looking at the development of different types of patterns. We're looking at economics. When we say economics, we're truly thinking about trade. I know a lot of people think money, but keep in mind trade and how what all is affected by trade. We're going to take a look at political, and we're not just talking about campaigns. We're looking at laws. We're looking at government, things of that nature, and then social patterns. The term social, I think a lot of people have a hard time with. You know, when we look at the idea of social, we're talking about how we interact with one another. So these developments would come about during this time period with these early river valley systems and will have a major effect in world history. We also take a look at the development of writing, the writing systems that developed during this time period would have a long lasting effect, as I've already mentioned one of them, the alphabet, and how it affects us today. So that is it for me. I hope everybody is able to copy down the notes. And if you need to watch this again, please feel free to do so. And for me here, that is all. I hope everybody has a great week. Stay safe, and see you next time.